heat and heat and more heat as we go into the summer. Oh, and happy summer, everybody. Happy solstice, a day late. My name is Kristen Butler. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at Historic London Town and Gardens. And I'm thrilled to welcome everybody here to Dr. Herbert Brewer's talk on the slave ship Margaret and its connection with London Town. Just a quick note before we get started, before I introduce Dr. Brewer. If you have never been to London Town before, I see a lot of members, so I know a lot of you have. But if you've never been to London Town before, please take advantage of this beautiful day and explore. There's a great exhibit with a great overview downstairs here in the Visitor Center. Very happy staff out in the historic area to tell you all about the history of this place. And then, of course, with a gorgeous day like this, you have to go into the gardens and explore at least a little bit and check out our new Pollinator Hotel that we are building right now with a concurrent program that's going on this morning as well. Speaking of more programs happening today, we're going to have another program this afternoon, a conversation led by the Conversation Starters, which is a group that helps bring people of diverse backgrounds together to have tough conversations in an effort to better understand each other and who we are as a community and as a country. And they will be having a conversation here from 1 to 3 in this room, again, in part inspired by Dr. Brewer's talk. So if you're able to run out, pick yourself up some picnic lunch, come back, enjoy the river view, and then join us back in here at 1 o'clock for that really engaging discussion. It's always a really interesting time for really deep reflection, and I always enjoy it. So Dr. Herbert Brewer is assistant professor at Morgan State University. He is historian of the African American diaspora, slavery and emancipation in the Atlantic world. He's co-author of the Guide to History of Slavery in Maryland, and he earned his PhD at the University of Maryland at College Park. Please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here, and it's a pleasure, of course, for me to come and share the fruits of some of my research. I'd like you to know that this is ongoing research, and these things do take a considerable amount of time to kind of follow people, trying to follow up sources, trying to follow up leads, and I should add, in addition to that, that the research I do, what historians do is we stand on the shoulders of others, lots and lots and lots of other people. It is a very collective and collegial, really, profession. And we really, friends, like you know somebody who's doing work on a particular thing, you just happen to come across them, and of course you're going to shoot them an email, like, hey, guess what I saw? I thought I know you're working on this, take a look at this. Those sorts of things we meet and work. So this it's a kind of a labor of love in that sense of the word, that you kind of really have to be into the work you're doing to sustain yourself, to keep doing it, because you will go forever, there is nothing, but you kind of have to keep coming back to those archives. In the age of the new digital technology, a lot of it has been made easier, but nonetheless, even to digitize things, it's a lot of work that's behind it, and people have to find where those things are, be able to assemble them in a meaningful way that people can understand and put that and make that available. So in other words, what I'm saying here, what you're going to hear today is the fruit of the work of a lot of people over a long period of time. It's not just me, and we're all part of this. Plus, in addition to that, one of the good things about talking to the general public is that you get feedback from them, so you kind of get a sense as well what people are thinking. It also impacts and affects what you're doing. So I'm going to today talk about the Margaret and try to put it in some context. This slave ship, the Margaret, that came here 300 years ago. Actually 301 years ago in August. It would make 301 years. August 1718. It arrived came up to the South River. So I'm going to talk about it, but I'm going to put in a bit of a context. The transatlantic slave trade is a large enterprise, and it is global, as we would imagine, the Atlantic Ocean. For that ship to get here, there's a whole lot of things, have to happen. And that ship is arriving here as well in the second decade of the 18th century, when the transatlantic slave trade itself had already been going on for 200 years. So kind of think about our own lives, 200 years, that's going far back. So even at that point, this system had been built up over that length of time. And it had transformed the world. It had transformed not only North America, it had transformed Europe greatly. It had transformed West Africa greatly. So it's a global system. Indeed, a few years ago, the term globalization was in vogue. But globalization is something that's been happening for hundreds of years. And really the first international system at so many different levels is being constructed. And one of the products of that, and I'll come to show you that, was how Africans are brought to North America, to other places too. But first, I'll do a bit of that context for you. Look at what's the business, what's going on here, who's running this stuff, what their motives might be, their calculations, and then look at who these people are, who we put on the ships, where are they coming from, what's the situation there, that causes those things to happen, and then we'll look at what happens here, what's going on here in the Chesapeake at the time that they arrived, right? So it's a whole series of examples to basically take those three things there together. From London, the ship goes to West Africa, Sierra Leone, comes here to most of the people offload at Annapolis, but some here in the South River and London down, and then they load up with tobacco and send the ship back to London. We'll understand that. So that's basically how I'm going to probably 30 minutes that we can talk about. We can ask questions and we can talk about stuff as we go. So it's a Monday, August 18, 1718. And this ship called the Margaret, which could have looked like that. Now this is not the Margaret, this is a 3-mast ship. That's what this is. Favored by folks doing maritime business in the early 18th century. And ships changed over time. There are brigands, there's sloops, there's a whole bunch of different types of them, but the 3-mast apparently was able to, the winds, because these are all sail ships, the winds of the Atlantic, the various Atlantic currents, made them able to go about places. Some ships are very large, some ships are a lot smaller, some ships have guns on them. This is a nasty business, as you would imagine. Some ships don't, so there's a variation as well in terms of precisely what those ships were. We do not have any specific description of the Margaret. What we have are entries into, these are business ledgers or journals. Like we know how many, the crew, we know who the captain is, those sorts of details, how long it took from point A to B, what commodities on the ship, those sorts of, nobody's interested in describing it. So we can only, come as close as possible in terms of what they might have looked like coming up the river and landing here. But so in August, the ship comes up. There's a guy called James Taylor Tressels is the name of the captain who's captaining that ship in 1718. And he has, when he enters into the Chesapeake, he has 105 Africans on board. Some of them are brought here first to London town. We don't have the specific numbers. We have more precise numbers for what's left off in Annapolis. And he might have, at that point, because these things change, left off a few more in other places along the South River. This is 1718. At this point in time, there's more, how should I put it? Let me back off a little bit. Up until that point, there was more control and regulation. But by the early 1700s, and I'll explain that later on, by the early 1700s, basically, ships could come straight on up into the Chesapeake and various rivers and deposit their cargo and go back. They did that. They didn't do that earlier, they did that later for a whole variety of different reasons. So it's possible that he might have also left and sold people in one or two other places. In Annapolis, he sells about 70. But in Annapolis, the main person who's agent, the trader, is a man by the name of James Carroll. And if the name Carroll sounds familiar, yes, it's very important that we'll talk about Carroll later. But Carroll is really one of the main business partners in this venture that brings the Margaret here. It had departed London on December 1st of 1717. So think about how this is not time. That's when the ship left London, loaded with rum, loaded with cloth, loaded with guns, loaded with a bunch of other, and went on to West Africa. There's this place called Bunce Island in the Sierra Leone River. We'll come to that part as well. And then after the transactions were done, they're bringing these people here, right? And then after folks are turned over to Mr. Carroll, he's loading tobacco, mostly on the ship for that return journey to London. So it's a triangular trade. I've got a nice little thing here where we can sort of see how that system that I just explained to you. So if you look at it, right, sugar, tobacco, cotton, that's basically what is being exported in the main from the Americas to Europe, right? And when we say Americas, I mean all of the Americas. So that's Brazil, that's the Caribbean, there's all those places going to Western Europe. And it's all of Western Europe. It's not just England, Britain, British Isles, it's France, it's Spain, those various places. And especially in the 18th century, which we're talking about, that's what those become cotton later on, the dominant exports that are going there. At a much earlier period, the Spanish were bringing gold, but at this point, that's not really important. It's marginal. So the world economy that's developing, sugar, tobacco are big. And then they're exporting, as I said, like, for example, the market would carry textiles, rum, guns down south into West Africa. And then labor, enslaved people captured, sold, and sent to the Americas over this period. The ship will return back to London in December of 1718. So it's like a year. It takes them a year to do the circuit. All right, that whole circuit that they're involved in. Now, the Margaret arrives in Annapolis at a time that the Chesapeake itself is going through big change. The plantation system is now emerging with what we historians label the tobacco revolution. For the first, when Maryland's first founded as Maryland in the 1630s, and we're coming up to the 400th anniversary soon, it's not a plantation society. It's not a plantation economy. And it takes a while before the individuals who are involved in the project, in this enterprise, kind of like, yeah, this tobacco thing is really going to work. I mean, there's Virginia over there. Virginia itself, it takes a bit of time for it to realize that tobacco is where profits could be made. They try to grow sugar. Sugar cannot grow in this climate, right? They try to, because folks are making a lot of money from sugar in the Caribbean and in Brazil, but sugar can't grow here, right? But tobacco is a crop that they come to that realization that, wow, we can probably bring that form of organization, the plantation, and we can bring it over here, and we can make money off of it. But in the meantime, when those early plantations are being set up, most of the labor force is actually English labor, right? They're indentured servants. There are people who have been imprisoned, that very first early labor force who are used on the very first tobacco plantations in Maryland are white people, if we want to use the colloquial or terms that we use today. And they're there, but it's not at the size, the scope that we'll come to see in the 18th century. Beginning in the last decades and the first decades of the 18th century, last decades of the 17th century, first decades of the 18th century, there's this transformation that happens, and that's what we're referring to as the tobacco revolution, where the landholdings become larger, there's more concentration of ownership as well, and the labor force changes as well. These things are happening together. Right? So we have fewer people owning larger estates, growing much more tobacco, mass production of tobacco. with this enslaved labor force from Africa. That's that big change that is occurring, and we can talk a little bit more about what that is. But so the Margaret is part of that change. That's what's important to understand here, right? That's the context in which Margaret is landing. There's a lot more ships now coming directly up into Chesapeake than prior to this point. Now, no, let me go back, right? That diagram gives you an idea of this larger system. This is a diagram of the transatlantic slave trade, in which some 12 million Africans are, of course, forcibly removed from their homes in West Africa over, this is a big picture, over a 350-year period, roughly speaking, 1500 to 1850, roughly speaking. And over that period of time, that you've got this system that's connected up to the world, only 5% land here in North America, not just Maryland, North America itself, right? The overwhelming majority of Africans who are brought to the New World during the transatlantic slave trade go to Brazil, go to South America, go to the Caribbean. It's a tiny, tiny proportion that end up here. And folks are generally surprised at that. You know, wow, that's small? Yeah, very, very small, very small. And again, there's a whole bunch of different reasons for that. But this, the period of time we're talking about, again, the 18th century, is when the bulk of that traffic is taking place, especially the first half of the 18th century. Again, why are people being brought here? They're being brought here to work, labor, grow food, grow particular crops. So there's a boom in a bunch of commodities. And so these commodities are the things really, they're the engine that are driving this movement, this mass movement that we see here. In North America, Virginia is the place that first has the large inflow of people to work. There are Africans in North America before Jamestown. The Spaniards come here. We know that a century before, the Spaniards are in St. Augustine, Florida. You know, they're in Santa Fe. They've got Africans with them because, of course, the Spaniards have an old history with Africa that predates Columbus, right? The city of Lisbon, Portugal, for example, something like 10 to 15% of Lisbon's population in 1492 is black. A prior relationship, a prior slave trade as well across the Sahara Desert, you know, that goes back centuries. So that's an old, very old history. There are Africans around the Mediterranean, etc. That history of plantations predates the New World. The New World is not the first place. It transforms it, and we'll kind of talk about how race comes into the picture, but in its earlier stages, it's kind of different, and it kind of looks different as well in terms of who's there. I mean, for one thing, in Europe, you've got white and black people enslaved, you know, for example. Whereas in the Americas, it'll be a different sort of system that emerges. So this is that larger context, that transatlantic slave trade, and Maryland starting to emerge, and Maryland starting to produce tobacco on these plantations. African labor starting to be the labor force that produces this commodity, this very precious commodity. So who's running this system? The system is being run by business people in Europe. In our case, in the case of the Margaret, London. London is the place. The ship, Margaret, is owned by a man called Samuel Barnum. We don't have a name, or rather a picture, a painting of him. I'll come to Barnum in a minute there. But more importantly, the Royal Africa Company, right? It's a big institution behind this system. The Royal Africa Company was first called the Company of Royal Adventurers Trading to Africa. So it's called the Royal Africa Company, but it's an English firm, and it's given a charter, a royal charter, right? In the 1650s, by 1660, they had founded it officially. England wants to get in on the act. The Spanish and Portuguese have been the dominant force up until this point, right? And the English are like, and the Dutch are kind of like there too, so the English are now getting in on the act. The English are slightly latecomers to this story. And this is like an aside, but North America is almost kind of like a backwater, almost an afterthought. Where was the main action? The main action was in Mexico. The main action was in, Nueva Granada in South America. The main action was in Brazil. The main action was in the Caribbean. Remember, the Dutch trade Suriname and Curacao for New York, right? For them like that, what's in New York? The sugar cane is being grown in the Caribbean and South America. That's what we want. You can have a patent. You don't need it. That for them, at that point, it was a good deal. But that gives you an idea of what they really thought. When they spoke of the Americas or the Indies, they're not talking about North America. North America was afterthought. So they want to get in on the action, and the Royal African Company is formed. I put the names of James II and Charles II, the Stuart Kings of England, there so you understand who's involved in it. Right? There's some of the shareholders in that company, and that's why they gave it a royal charter. Not only did they give it a royal charter, but they granted it a monopoly. And they granted a monopoly on slave trading. So when the Royal African Company is formed, basically, the law said, the English law said, if you're an English colony anywhere in the Americas, the only person or agent you can buy labor from is from the Royal African Company. So once you were an English colony and you needed a labor force, you have to contact the Royal African Company to acquire your labor force. You have to go through them. And the Royal African Company itself is doing all its business through London. So those are like, there are added costs to that, in the sense that you're not, in effect, then, importing directly to your colony. If the Royal African Company had its business, and it does have business in the Caribbean and those other places, it would take its ships there, people there. If you had a border, it would take them there from the Caribbean or from somewhere in South America, and bring them, usually actually it was Barbados, bring them up into North America in those early days in that period of time. The seal is there, Elephant and Castle. I kind of put out there, it's interesting because Elephant and Castle, anybody who's been to London City in England, there's a part of London called Elephant and Castle in the city. And it's kind of famous and has and then there are arguments amongst historians as to the origins of the name itself, but it's quite likely as well that it is connected up to that time period in terms of who owns the land and properties, etc. I'm bringing those things to point to how integrated these relationships were. The businesses that folks were dealing with, the names given to places, right? These are important parts, the very sinews of the society, were tied into this business that's going on. So the kings there. John Locke owned shares, the great philosopher of liberalism, right, and freedom, John Locke. Right? He was a shareholder in the Royal African Company. Again, I'm making that point. It's kind of like when people tell folks that I think it was Newton, the physicist, who also believed in alchemy, and that you could create, at the same time, people have a whole bunch of different kinds of ideas in their heads, right, simultaneously. Later on, people were like, oh, that's contradictory. But I don't think Locke really kind of saw a contradiction. Right? This is the way to make money. This is what's happened. No. These are ways.
How did Locke handle the whole business of human bondage and slavery?
Locke defined it. I mean, I don't want to go all the way off of Locke, but Locke talked quite a bit about it. He kind of worked through his contradictions. And Locke didn't really even think that unfreedom, let's call it that, was like unfreedom should not exist. So in Locke's own time, all Brits were not free. People didn't have. There was not one man, one vote, one woman, one vote. It was not a democracy. But he talked about labor. For him, property was what was important, and that if you own property, that entitled you, to have a voice and have a say. That he tied those two things together. Right? It was this ownership of property, which was something in our country when independence comes. That's the big argument that folks are having. What's the basis? What's the criteria for citizenship, and how important is property in that whole equation? Right, and the folks who defended slavery defended it on that basis. I'm defending property, the principle of property. The freedom of your ability to that was a big part of that argument. There's also something called a Guinea coin, and in the British system, yeah. Okay, just guineas, the old British currency. A guinea is a 1/4 ounce of gold. Guinea is also the part of West Africa where a lot of the gold mines are, including where some of the people who were on that ship, the Margaret, came from as well. And so that enters into the vocabulary, enters into the language, right, of Britain and the British Isles. And the guinea becomes so James, and they start minting, that's James's image. They start minting them in the middle of the 17th century, and it would be a British currency until the 1800s, the guinea. This quarter ounce of solid gold from West Africa or from the New World.
So, were the people who were mining the gold slaves?
No, that gold could have come from a whole bunch of different places by that point. So most of the gold coming into Europe was coming from the Americans. Who was mining it? Slaves were mining it. Native Americans who had been enslaved were mining it. Africans who they brought were mining it. That's what that labor force was. Again, most of it was coming from South America, via Spain. And the Spanish, of course, were exchanging and trading. But prior to that point, Europe in particular, most of its gold was coming from West Africa, across the trans-Saharan trade. And that gold was mined in a whole variety of ways. Artisanal, as we call it today, small people paying, or large landholders and kings, etc., who had, serfs and others to do that work for them. So it's a whole variety of things that happened. So that kind of gives us a sense of the financiers and owners. Now, private investors tended to raise money and put money together, which is kind of how the Margaret was most likely financed. Who put up that money? Credit. But a lot of people own shares in it. So Bonham is the owner, but he had folks who gave him credit, who were shareholders, smaller shareholders, and he raised funds, and of course paid them back, bonds and that sort of thing, paid them back. And indeed, the insurance system that the transatlantic slave trade was able to get generated, which today is organized as Lloyd's of London, which is like it's a reinsurance is what it is. The insurance companies insure themselves in this big pool. That's kind of how they operate. Those ideas get their start from these ships. All of these ships are financed. All of them are insured. It's a modern business practice, which is like an innovation. It's kind of strange to kind of think about woo, what a way to bring a kind of innovation. But other people in industry and business will start to copy that model. That the folks who are pooling their risk, when investing in these slave ships, what they end up doing. So Bonham is in the center of all of this activity. There in London, the ship was built in London. London, Bristol, and Liverpool, those three cities, are the main places where shipbuilding in England was taking off. And thousands of ships are being provisioned, built in those places for the transatlantic slave trade. Throughout the duration of the transatlantic slave trade, there's something like 37,000 voyages. We know that because historians over the last 50 years have just been collecting, all that insurance information, right?
Where did you get the wood from when you built them?
They're getting wood from everywhere. The forests of Europe, for example, right? So they're not that much timber export and import. So folks are building. So in Britain, they're cleaning up the forests. They're bringing important things from Scandinavia. They're importing it from the continent itself. But Hamburg is a big shipping, Bordeaux and Bordeaux, Nantes, in France. And so they're all big shipbuilding, and of course the timber industry that's there, the forest and wood products. So right there, that's one thing that they're producing. And maybe even further east in terms of bringing timber to build ships. transforms Liverpool. The city of Liverpool has now built both Liverpool and Bristol and England have now built a very big new museums to the Transatlantic Sacred Museums. How they transformed, telling the story of how they transformed their cities. Liverpool goes from a kind of backwater port, small town port, to a big important center of British industry through this process. And again, it's in the 18th century that Liverpool is transformed. This period that we're talking about. London, of course, just grows even more. The east end of London, with all of these connections in shipping, the requisitioning of goods, and banking, and those things. And of course, Bonham, who's from East Anglia, he's tied into that city in a deep way. And later on in his life, his children and grandchildren, in Britain, they have this thing where people buy peerages. You kind of have a lot of money. You give the government to sell it, and you become knighted. And his grandson becomes a member of Parliament. He himself started off as a ship captain, but he saw this as an avenue to of social mobility, right? A way for him to rise in society, and so he took advantage of these things that were on offer for him. So officers and crews, Captain James Taylor Cassels is the ship captain, and he had a crew of 20. The crews came from anywhere, literally, international crews. Since it's an English ship, they might have mostly been English people, but not necessarily only English people. There would have been a whole bunch of different people. There's a whole sort of worlds that existed, a second kind of world with its own, strange rules amongst themselves in the maritime world. All kinds of people would have been in that ship. Someone needs to do like a good study, for example, of Christopher Columbus's crew. Everybody talks about Columbus. You'd be surprised what you might find in that crew, who those people were, and the kinds of places that they came from. Think about it. It's mobility, right? Being on the ship, it's mobility. It's you get away from whatever you're getting away from that you need to get away from. It's a possibility of opportunity or freedom in many kinds of ways. Later on in the 18th century, one of the things that there's a scholar, Jeffrey Bolster, has written a very good book called Black Jacks about how African American sailors who are working as sailors. So that's one way for them to become free. Some of them are enslaved working, and some of them buy the freedom or become free and work on ships. A way to move around and just basically gain some control over their destiny. So that world is an interesting sort of world. It's a brutal world, not only for those enslaved who are on those ships, but also too for the crew. The captain of the ship, Herbert Brewer, knew what he was talking about, because actually he worked on the ship. They were dictators, and they kind of had to have a vicious, that sociopathic, gene or something like that to be in that job. And did I put that part here? Yeah. Right. I wanted to, maybe I can just bring this. The Bunce Island, where those Africans were brought to London town from, is a place that has some notoriety. And since we're just talking about the crew and who gets on the ship, there's a very famous ship captain called John Newton. He's captured in a movie called Amazing Grace. It was done maybe 20 years ago or something like that. In which this movement in England emerges to oppose the transatlantic slave trade, the whole anti-slave trade movement in England. This is in the late 1700s. John Newton becomes one of the figures there. What stands out about John Newton is that John Newton was a slave captain who saw the light. He's the guy who penned the words to Amazing Grace, the song, right? And some people might know that story, and he gave up on it, and he became an advocate for the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade, of which he came out with and knew, right? And referring to the same place, Bunce Island, where these Africans come here to learn. He writes his letter to his wife. This is March, I like to go down now at the factory in the river of Sierra Leone we are at, preparing for the sea. I mean, he's there, right? This is a little later than our people who we're looking at, but he's there, he's part of it. It's broad, it's complex. Another name, just kind of throwing that reference, Thomas Bo Walker. That name I thought, but then he's the great-grandfather of George Herbert Walker. Oh, that name sounds familiar. Yes, it would, because he's the great-great-grandfather of George Herbert Walker Bush, right? And he was a notorious slave trader, Thomas Bo Walker, in Bunce Island, same place that Newton had gone to, same place but they weren't as bad as the guy I'm going to tell you guys about later. But Walker, by the way, met his fate at the hands of his men. His crew killed him. That's how he died. History is something else when you travel again to these.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
His crew killed him. Yeah. He was hated by his men to death and they killed him. Kind of a tragic end for him. So let me turn then to part two. So we've done with Europe, let's go down into West Africa. And we're talking about Upper Guinea coast. Now this is where it gets tricky because I should have had my map. Because you can see Bunce Island today, and I'll keep talking as I so to get, what I'm going to do here is get on the internet side there. So Sierra Leone is where they came from, Sierra Leone. And we'll just wait for, let's let this reduce a bit. Okay. So we kind of see, I want you to see, okay, so the ship is coming from London, right up here, and it's making the journey down here to Sierra Leone. Right over there. And then it'll come across to Naples. That's how we're going to go. Now, if we zoom into Sierra Leone, right, zone in Sierra Leone, you see Freetown, which is today's capital. Freetown did not exist at that point. This here is the Sierra Leone River. That's what this is, an estuary of the Sierra Leone River. And in the estuary of the Sierra Leone River is an island called Banks, they used to call it back then. Banks Island. It's so small, there it is. You can't see it from, you kind of really have to keep going. This is Banks Island. Bang, there you go. And if we do the satellite thing. And today it's only ruins. Can you see these ruins right over here? Ruins. Those are the ruins of the fort that was built on Banks of Bunce Island by the Royal Africa Company in the 1600s. That's right over there, Bunce Island. And these are the ruins here that sat in the middle. And sure.
Why Bunce Island?
It's, as you can see there, it's self-contained because it being an island. They built the fort, it's fortified, it's cannon all around, right? So you know who's coming, and you can tick them off, you know, if you're not invited. So you've got protection. So from a security standpoint, it's perfect, right? The African people who live in the African polities, right? There's a whole variety there's a complex system of polities that are on the shore inland, right? They can't attack. They're, using protection. And at the point that, say, the Margaret is arriving at Bunce Island, again, 200 years after the transatlantic slavery has started, what was there even the name Sierra Leone is not an African name, it's a Portuguese name. And the name Sierra Leone comes from, it's Sierra, the mountains, Leone, lion. It's something that Portuguese mariners give to that part of the West African coast. Portuguese mariners, when they began in the 1400s, the late 1400s, to go down the coast of Africa, before Magellan and the rest of them make their thing around the world, that's how they go. They go down the African coast, they go into the Indian Ocean, they go across the Pacific, down South America, and back when they make that. But that's where they start, right? And they give names to every part of the coast, of all the places they went to. And they're making maps, that's what they're doing. It's a decades-long process. Right? They're making maps, they come down, go back up, come further down, go back up, come further down. And they're making maps and they're giving names as they go along. So even till today, a lot of West African rivers have Portuguese names. Right? There are lots of them. Rio Pongo, Cavala, Portuguese names, straight along. St. John, St. Paul, Portuguese names. They're giving all these names. But they're also giving the spaces names as well. And so for them, this particular area, the mountains on the coast will look like lines. So they call it Sierra Leone. And it's like, so you're in the ship, that must be, kind of like it does. We'll remember it, we know it. And so there's the windward coast, which comes after Sierra Leone because the direction of the wind shifts for the windward coast. Then there's the Gold Coast, which is where most of the coast is closest to the mines, the gold mines. So that becomes the Gold Coast. And on and on and on. So that's how those names develop over time. But when they arrived there originally, the political systems that were in place, they fight wars, they find allies, right? So that by this point, they've overthrown and encouraged developments of different factions or different groups of people, who are now in power in particular areas. Folks who can work with them, because Africans are other people from different parts are involved in that process. They basically create an infrastructure for the capture of people, right? And make no, usually we kind of have people will say, you kind of hear people talking about, what about the Africans? They were enslaving their own people and they're capturing their own people. The issue in part is the notion of own, right? Because we have a modern notion of race. Human beings haven't always identified themselves the way they identify themselves today, right? And I can give us lots of examples of that in Europe, a place that I'm sure most of us are more familiar with. Names have been called different things over different periods of time, right? Germans have history, the English have histories, the Irish have histories, all of them. The Italians have histories. There were no Italians before Garibaldi and Mazzini and those people in the 19th century, right? They had different republics, different kingdoms, etc. And we can go on and on, right? There was no Germany, actually, you can go to that part. Right? It was Prussia, it was Brandenburg, on and on. Those are like the nation, and even the ethnic identities up to the French, ethnic identities are kind of fairly new in the sweep of history. For us, it's like, okay, well, 200, 300 years ago. But in the sweep of history, as much as it's newer than that. And similarly, with the Africans, it's no different in that regard. Just because we're black, what we call black, and some for us to think about as well, what our notions of race are like fairly modern things. Those people would have really been like, what do you mean by black? And they would have good reason to ask you, what you're talking about. What does that mean? Right? And in many ways, part of the legacy of this entire process is the development of notions of race, right? Which come out of this experience. That's kind of part of it, especially when you think about people coming from different parts of West Africa and ending up here in Maryland, right? Senegambia is thousands of miles from Sierra Leone. Angola is thousands of miles from Sierra Leone. So why would the people who will speak the same language, they might not worship the same gods, you can go on and on. Different cultures, why would they be cousins, friends, know each other? Oh, you went to Sierra Leone? By the way, I have a friend from Angola. complex history. Oh, let me go back. Yes, go back to the. Basically, the Mandate-speaking peoples and cultures, the Mel Atlantic ethno-linguistic cultures are what's dominant in that particular part. And like I gave the example a few minutes ago about Western Europe, think about the Romance languages, right? So French, Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, boom, that's one sort of language, and one sort of identity. Then you got the Germanic languages, that's something else. And you got the Slavic languages. We understand those differences, don't we? Right. So there you have that same dynamic that's taking place. There's Mandarin, there's the Mel Atlantic, there's the Kwa, the different, ethno-linguistic traditions that they have. And again, since the transatlantic slave trade itself initiates wars, as I was just saying, there's migration. People flee. People become refugees. Lots of things are happening. It's an insecure. People have insecurity. That's one of the things that the consequences. So not only are people being ripped from their homes, but basically societies are being destroyed in the process of that business of people being ripped from their homes. Because you're not being ripped from your home, voluntarily by force. Nobody's like, I want to sign up to go on the ship. That's not happening. Something about the people. Again, this region, once the plantation owners here, especially in South Carolina, get to know a little bit about it, they start to call it the Rice Coast. For a good reason, because that part of West Africa is engaged in extensive rice cultivation. They're the rice people. You go further down the West African coast, historically they're not really into rice. I mean, everybody eats rice now, but historically that's not what the story is. It's kind of like a rice curtain, if you want metaphorically. From Senegambia down to the Middle Coast, rice. And that means that the knowledge and the technology, understanding how to do it is diffuse. When ads went up in newspapers, advertising slaves, it would say, these people were brought from the rice coast. So if you're a South Carolina farmer hoping to, buy, it's like, let me go. That's where they come from. You come from Sierra Leone. Yeah. They know how to grow rice. Don't need to teach anybody. Just bring them and put them right in there. That's the kind of that's an acknowledgement. Which is interesting in a way. You can read slave ads and ads for sale of slaves in all kinds of ways. It's an interesting acknowledgement on the part of the plantation owners that their slaves weren't done. There's like a specialized knowledge. None of them can just jump in a rice paddy now and know what to do. It takes a lot of training. It's a whole culture that supports that sort of knowledge, that sort of thing. And you're aware of that. The other big profession, if you like, is mining. And just general metallurgy. Blacksmithing is big. It's that they're mining people. Blacksmithing, goldsmithing. You ever get a chance right now at the Museum of African Art in Washington, D.C. There's a beautiful exhibit display going on West African gold jewelry makers. And some old pieces as well. I encourage you guys to take a look at great kind of history and context of some of this that we're talking about. So that's who's most likely getting on that ship. There's some of those people, because it's so widespread, we know that on that ship would have been folks who would have known some of blacksmithing, definitely been farmers, we have farmers on all the ships, so most of them. This is an actual, from the 1750s, I believe, drawing of Buns Island. So it's contemporary. So this is close to the time that the folks were brought here to London town. An Englishman who is from the Northwest, giving me got a flag up there, some ship, maybe a dock, but I'm thinking probably shipwreck. That's all we go to on the island. So who's running the business there? The Royal African Company is running it, but they've got a guy called John Bedster. His friends and enemies called him the Old Cracker. He probably called himself that as well. He's one of the most notorious. He's the most notorious leader on Buenos Aires' history in terms of running the place. But on the coast of West Africa, where you have real ruthless people, he was beyond ruthless. His reputation, everybody calls him mean, just a vicious character. And this is other slave traders calling him that. Right? That's the kind of reputation he had. And he's the guy who's running Buenos Aires. He's the guy who's Samuel Bunham now, our man in London. He knows him, they're doing business, he's contacted him. In fact, Leadstone used to work for Royal African Company, and then he left, and then became a pirate. So what he would do is that when Royal African Company's ships, have people in it, he and his men would go and raid the ship, and basically take the people, put them on another ship, and send them across the Atlantic Ocean for money. The British government and him were at it, or the owners of the Royal Africa were at it. He's an outlaw, he's doing those things. Luckily for him, I'm putting that from his perspective, Royal African Company loses its monopoly. In 1689, there's a revolution in England, and the king is deposed. And once that happens, one of the first things they do is they get rid of one of the sources of their income and money, which is the Royal Company's monopoly. So once they do that, it opens the way for people like Leadstone to come into their own. And so Leadstone now can go directly to somebody like James Carroll and sort of say, hey, we can provide you with the people. Or Bonham can directly, we can do it. We don't need to go through the company anymore. And so there's this increase really that's happening of Africans being brought with that loss of Royal African Company's monopoly. Robert Plunkett is another trader who's there, involved in this specific deal along with Leadstone. He owns actually some of the African, meaning that the money's going to go to him when they come up here. He owns some of them. And Plunkett, there's this nice quote of Plunkett from a letter in which he's actually saying, hey, you guys got a pretty good piece of cargo. These people, I've seen their work. He's talking about their leather work. He's talking about their work with straws, mats, and a whole variety of things. Handicraft, they're very smart, they're very intelligent people. Maybe he's selling, but he's also acknowledging who these people are and what they do, what they can do. Okay, so let's kind of move on here. The passage to America, it takes about 2 months. It's what one of those three-masted, could be a sloop, brigantine, a schooner, it doesn't specify, but they're using all these types. These are the different types of ships, they're using all of them. It could be one of those. 136 folks are on board, right? The records tell us 136. 30% female, 70% male, right? And it's interesting if you look at that statistic, it changes over time. When the transatlantic slave trade started, going back 200 years now, it's almost all male. And then they start to also capture and bring women, so that the number of females will increase over time. But over the entirety of it, it's more men than women, right, are captured. Of that group, 2/3 are adults. Of the group in that specific 136, 2/3 are adults. The other third are, James Carroll describes them in a whole variety of ways, and so I've broken it down into, okay, young adults, teenagers, and children, because he's got all kinds of ways of saying, the person's not an adult, and a young man, or a young male, those sorts of things, various things he's saying. So a third of them are most likely, from his perspective, young people.
Question.
Sure.
So is this ship just known for this one voyage, or is there record of other voyages?
Come to that in a minute there. The ship also went to the Caribbean. It's not the only voyage. And it is also at an earlier point. At a later point. And it's also they're refitted. Right, that's one of the things that they get refitted as well in terms of what it is that you need them to do. So it's not just going to go out of business. They will, just send other commodities, non-human commodities at some other point. And sometimes the other way around as well, where they retrofit something that's So there we go. These are the people who come here. Having that knowledge coming from that place, these numbers. This voyage of the Margaret is the first recorded voyage of people from Sierra Leone and Guinea, that region of West Africa in Maryland. Right? There are people in Maryland being brought, as we said before, from the late 1600s, being brought, specifically from Africa. But the ships that bring them are coming from Senegambia. Some of them are coming from Angola, right? Who does a lot of work on southern Maryland. She's looked at a lot of that. But Senegambia and Angola. But in this case, they're coming from Sierra Leone. So a whole new African culture is being introduced into Maryland, is what I'm saying. With the coming of Margaret. That's what, in many ways, that's a significant thing to represent that new layer, that new thread into the mosaic here.
And you use the word expand sort of African American culture specific. So this would really mean that London town here was the destination of many, many ships coming from Sierra Leone. Am I correct?
No.
Or are you saying simply there's enough black people who were transported here that they then provided this pure culture, so to speak, of Sierra Leone?
No, I'm saying that this is the first.
That's what I meant.
It's the first. But it's not even close to a lot, because where the bulk of them are sent is to Annapolis. Annapolis, yeah.
Okay.
Annapolis is like 70 out of that 100 are sent to Annapolis. That's where they go.
Okay.
The other thing is that, so
I guess I'm thinking of the heritage of the existing African American people.
right. So the other thing is that when and maybe I should just move on to that part. When what's his name? Carol sends the people there. And after the Margaret arrived in London town on the 18th, and so some people at South River, and then proceeds to deliver the leader of the cargo to James Carroll on Thursday the 23rd, 5 days after their arrival in London. Now Carroll sells them in small pieces. I think the largest bunch, if you like, if you will, he sells to his uncle Charles Carroll, the distiller. He sells them 5, and then he sells to himself. Because they're not owned, they're not owned by him. He's a trader.
Sure.
They're owned by Bonham, they're owned by Leadstone, they're owned by Plunkett. And so and actually the captain also buys his own person and sells them again. Carroll, but most of the sales are in 2s and 1s. Right? Most of the sales are in 2s and 1s. And he has a list, he's very meticulous. He has a list in his account book of who he's selling them to, how much he's selling them for. And what would be, and that's part of the research that I'm still going to be doing, is like tracing these people. There are ways to trace these purchasers. They might be from Anne Arundel County, they might be from further afield, they might even be from Virginia, they might be from different places, because Carl will do, these guys who network, will advertise, I've got a consignment coming in, contact me this day. So, that being the case, that knowledge and that, it would have been spread around, definitely the Chesapeake, that Chesapeake society. And who knows, they might have also, then or later, come into contact with people who were like, oh, you kind of sound like somebody from, the way you speak, maybe say something to them, and then they're like, is that this guy speaking? That's what we have. So it's just for us to think about, precisely how, for the African Americans now, and people who are now becoming African Americans, how they process all of that and reconstitute their culture, out of that, out of those different parts, recreate something new. But
So does anybody around here would still speak the mother language? I mean,
No.
that was totally,
no.
I mean,
So there are many people in Maryland who speak it, but that's because they just came from Sierra Leone over the last 20, 30 years.
there was not.
Yeah, but not going back that far. And where would you see the traces? You would see the traces in the food. You would see the traces in, again, aspects of people's dress or, the quirks of the society, of the culture. Why do people jump the broom? There's a whole bunch of things that folks might do. The cosmologies that they have and how they think about the relationship with time. Many sort of burial practices, actually, and rituals around burial, ceremonies around burial. Those sorts of things seem to be preserved more easily, I guess, because you're kind of away from anybody watching you or controlling what you do, even though that too is a struggle. But so there's a whole variety of ways that those things would retain themselves over time. So he sells. This is an example of an ad here. I mentioned that earlier. Women-imposed Negroes who are well acquainted with the culture of rice arrive from Buns Island to be sold on Tuesday, the second of all the snacks. Those are the kind. But this comes from Carolina later on. But again, it's an idea of how we don't know. We don't have any evidence of Carroll's ad that he put in the paper. We just have what he said. Carroll said in his account book about who he sold and when he sold it. But that gives an idea. Perhaps he would have put something like that in the paper, or had a broadsheet produced and distributed, so people would know that he had anything to sell. Yes, this is an important part, but this is kind of, so the Margaret, as I said earlier, to represent the first recorded shipment of enslaved Africans from Sierra Leone region to Maryland. So we can say that. And we understand also that the tobacco revolution had transformed Maryland. But two ways we can look at it in just numerical terms is the population, the black population, kind of like, we connect to the point you were asking about. In 1700, the estimate is like about 3,000 enslaved Africans are in Maryland, making up about 11% of the population. In 20 years, that number jumped to 12,000 and make up 20% of the population by 1720. So this bigger presence immediately there, and of course the Margaret came here in 1718, right? So the Margaret is part of that transformation that we've been talking about.
I have one question. This ship, as you said, came from Buns Island. How did the slaves get to Buns Island?
They're captured in the interior. And it's a business. They're captured in the interior. They're armies, right? They're armies who go out there and capture people. So, and they're brought to one side as prisoners. Right.
So they're physically transported by the local population in that area?
They're physically transported by Samuel Liston's employees, allies, business partners, some of whom obviously are Africans.
And the process of capturing these people, are you going to discuss that?
Well, I mean, we can talk about it later, definitely. We can go into that. About that too. But this is broader. I picked it up. So, yeah, let's come back to that. Okay, so who's this guy, James Carroll? So we're here now, this thing. James Carroll. James Carroll is the nephew of Charles Carroll, right? The settler, and of course, Carroll County, New Carrollton, John Carroll. Very important people. An Irish Catholic family, an Irish Catholic dynasty. They have enormous influence and talent because they lived there for several generations. They're powerful and influence, and that sort of thing. Charles Carroll's secretary of the Declaration of Independence, who is Charles the settler's son, and therefore Jesus' first cousin. But James has no money, and this Margaret project catapults him. It's big time for him. It really makes him an important figure. It puts him right up there, and it allows him to do so much more, buy more land. He wasn't married, didn't have children, and he bequeathed his entire estate to the Jesuit province of. He's a devout Catholic. We read his. I kind of had a photo of the last will and testament, with God-fearing and that. And how did they kind of think about that? He left some of his fine clothes, he says, to particular slaves. He calls them by name. you know, I want so-and-so to have my frock, my coat, I want so-and-so to have this one. And he's a man who sees himself as a good man. He educates many of his cousins and nephews and those sorts of things as well. You know, so those are the different sides to this guy. And he's thinking, I'm wishing, he says in the last one Testament, you know, I'm wishing that, you know, God, you know, I go to heaven and God forgives me and, you know, accepts me up there and those sorts of things. He's organizing this. John Carroll is one of his cousins as well, the first bishop and archbishop of the United States, and founder of Georgetown University. Actually, there's a tie between Margaret and Georgetown University because the same James Carroll, who we're talking about here, who financed the Margaret here, he takes that money, that you know, as I said, his estate, his wealth, and he donates it gives it all to the Jesuits, who then create Georgetown University. So that's how Georgetown right now itself is kind of going through a reckoning and engaging itself with that history, you know, that it has. Carroll owns property all over Anne Arundel County, in Prince George's County. That's where they're really dominant. That's their base. Anne Arundel and Prince George's. What's the name of that? It's near Guinea, big estate there, where most of the Jesuit slaves worked on those plantations. Because the Jesuits then become the big single largest landholders in the state after Carroll gives them, you know, the land and the slaves. So that's part of that tie between this Catholic elite. And you know, so that's, you know, it's complicated, right? It's complex. In this relationship, this is what I was talking about, the last Old Testament, and he's bequeathing this estate. Catholics are barred from holding political office in Maryland, right? By law. When Calvert is basically brushed off by the Protestant gentry in the 1680s here, right? They passed these bills, right? Barring Catholics from holding political office, specific political office. So as much money as Carroll had, he couldn't hold political office. Right? And it took them a good almost 100 years to, you know, up until the point of before the Revolution, that they were able to remove that barrier. Right? But for that entire period, they had money, but they didn't have political power. And it burns him, meaning that James Carroll is he's acutely aware of it. And it all, you know, so he was born in Ireland, but he come here as a young man, he's often brought him here. But they were, and so they focused on, okay, we'll make money, maybe we'll get that economic base, but they were excluded. You know, you're outsiders, made to feel the pangs and pains of exclusion. And so he's very conscious of it. Maybe in part that also might, we can speculate, explain part of their drive and ambition as well. You know, we're kind of like, you know, I'm sticking there and show these guys what we can. But that's part of the history as well. So I'll end on that part, the legacies. Part of what is happening here is the remaking of, I argue, remaking race in the early 18th century Chesapeake. It's not for us to take for granted that people's identities are fixed, right? Folks always talk about identity politics all the time, without defining what exactly are they talking about, and it becomes like a shorthand. But it's way more complicated than that. The ideas people had about race at that time are different from the ideas people have about race now, and you can actually see it happen. I guess that's my argument there, because in Charles Carroll's his book where he's marking the people, he's marking who he's selling. Every time he says a Negro man, Negro woman, Negro man, Negro woman, Negro boy, Negro, 67 times, you know. as if an incantation. You know, he's like, inscribe me, erase, erase. He could have just put, why didn't he just put, I mean, we know that there are slaves on the ship, because that's all that list is the people who he sold from the Margaret. He could have just said, man, woman, why the extra attention to Negro? You know, and I think we should ask the question, right? We should ask the question. And so these people are leaving Bunce Island, or they're leaving their homes even before they left Bunce Island. They're not black people, and clearly that's not their sense of themselves. They're not even African, you know, because African itself is a kind of consciousness, you know. Think about it that way, you know. At what point do Englishmen become Americans? You know? At what point do they become white? And think about these sorts of things. You know, what are the conditions or circumstances that forces you to become conscious of that particular identity? Right? And so this process here of attaching certain things to their color of their skin or their place of origin, right, becomes important in the context of this transaction that's going on.
Was the term Negro to make a distinction between being white skin?
Yes, I mean,
That was the
Yeah.
real defining. Skin color.
sure,
was
skin color becomes a signifier. That's what skin color, a signifier for low status, a signifier for unfreedom, you know, and those sorts of things. Like somebody who's not capable of citizenship or inclusion or those sorts of things becomes that signifier. Yes. And this is when it becomes important to make that distinction.
I'm wondering what role, because Maryland plays a huge role in the convict slave trade, and because of the meticulous records of the ships at that time, and I'm trying to think if the Margaret goes on to play a role in the convict slave trade at all, or does it
No.
stay strictly with the slave trade?
Slave trade.
Okay, so I'm wondering if, in terms of records, in terms of having to keep those records, in terms of insurance policies, if it was important to make that distinction between a convict that was on one of these ships as opposed to a Negro. I'm just kind of wondering, because Maryland had such brought in so many convict laborers during that 100-year period up until right before the Revolutionary War.
I mean, because, and I see your point here. All I'm saying here is that Negro takes on a new and special meaning, you know. And even if you think about convict, if you're white and a convict, after your term is up, assuming you live, your term is out, it's like indentured service. You can basically disappear,
Yeah.
you know. But that badge is on you, you know. So it's a convenient kind of way, okay, we can keep tabs. It might start that way, but then everything else builds around it. And that signifier just becomes a signifier over time. So that's, you know, basically I'll kind of end it there and we can talk some more. Thank you very much. Questions? Comments?
Excuse me, could you, the seal of the
Right after
elephant,
coming.
can you explain what we see here?
I've never really, sat to do it, though that would be interesting itself, because there are two black people at the corners. So I assume that's.
Are they
that's-
black? I cannot.
That's Africa. The castle and the elephant and the castle, that's the one that historians have discussed about what the meaning of it. In Europe, there's a, there's an old building that was a place for victuals and drinks, taverns, etc., with that name. But again, it is emerging at the same time in the 17th century. That's when it sort of appears there. There are images of travelers who had gone to the East, Africa, to the Middle East, etc., and seen the pashas and the various important people riding atop elephants. You know, so that it just symbolized that sort of power and those sorts of things. Also, elephants are native to West Africa. You know, the castle is sitting on top of it. I mean, different
It looks
interpretations.
like the Indian elephant. I don't think it looks like a
It could be. It could be.
Yeah.
It could be. But these guys are in West Africa, so I would have to assume that it would be. I can't see the ears. I'm told that it's the ears. You can tell the by the ears.
And what are being held there by the humans, the they hold in their
I
hand?
do not know what they hold, some sort of staff.
It looked like a child first, the way I see it.
Yeah,
so
no,
I-
it's not children, it's probably some staff, some sort of staff, yes.
So I'm assuming that the two major ports in Maryland were Annapolis and Baltimore. Do we have any sense, that may not be a part of your research, I'm not sure, but do we have a sense of what was taking place simultaneously at the port of Baltimore? Which ships were coming into Baltimore and from what countries?
So, nothing is coming into Baltimore. We know that because Baltimore doesn't exist at the time we're talking about. Baltimore comes up at the end of the century when slavery is on the decline already. So it's funny, Maryland is a strange place. The free black population of Maryland
Okay,
is increasing,
okay.
right? And this is not, so into the 19th century, and Baltimore really gets going in the 19th century.
Okay.
The revolution is taking place. The transatlantic slave trade and the importation of Africans into the United States ends
Okay.
right in the first decade of the 19th century, right? And at that point, Baltimore is still a small place.
Okay.
And Baltimore's explosion and its growth is after all of that. And Baltimore's power, actually, Baltimore is powered by wage labor, if you like.
Okay.
Baltimore is powered by the labor of free people, free blacks and white people. That's who really is Baltimore. Baltimore City has more than Africans in Baltimore. But Baltimore City actually has more free blacks than it has slaves.
That was so, what was
Throughout the 19th
so
century.
attractive to Frederick Douglass?
Exactly. You
about
could,
Baltimore?
and sort of talking about people sitting in prison and losing themselves. If a black person came to Baltimore, they could lose themselves in the free black population. The assumption would not be, you're a slave where you're from, where your papers. The assumption would be that no, you're free.
So when we think about slavery on the eastern shore of Maryland and the plantations on the eastern shore, Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, their ancestors would have arrived in Annapolis
Yes.
and then been bought by
Yes.
slave owners
That's
on the
exactly.
eastern shore.
That is right. And then again, up to a point, you see, there was a kind of like that window. There's a window. The window is after the Royal African Company loses its monopoly
I see.
in
Okay.
89, 69. And so for that 20, 30-year period, they arrived straight from Africa.
Okay.
Right up the Atlantic coast, right up the, Severn, right up the Dachshund. Those ships went straight. There's a plantation. Sorry that I'm blanking on this. There's a plantation in St. Mary's County. Suddenly, that's it. Suddenly has the distinction, I guess, of receiving in one shipment. So the largest single shipment of people directly from came from the Gold Coast. They went right up there to Suddenly, and unloaded it. It's like 300, 200 something. It's a huge number right up there. And that happened in other places, but just that it illustrated, in a way that. And that's quite different from even an earlier period where Reno Walsh is a historian who's trying to think about. At a much earlier period, when people like Matata Souza, this is the early period. This is Ark and Dove, so this is 1630, 1640, 1650. There are blacks who are coming into Maryland from the Caribbean, from Cape Verde, from Brazil, from different places. Some as indentured servants, some enslaved, some as just free people. It's not clear. That 17th century period is actually illustrates the point about how race and ideas about race change. But the 18th century is different. It's all about the clampdown has happened, and the lock-in has been set now. That shift has occurred at that point.
Can you talk about the factors that made the slave trade slow down and stop, please?
So a lot of this is economic. There's an economic side to it that's big. The soil tobacco takes a lot out of the soil, in fact. And all those old tobacco areas, the yields are getting less. And so there's some new areas going out. People are going into Kentucky, people are going into parts of North Carolina, etc. But then, while that is happening, while that's declining, folks are looking for, the people who own these assets are looking for other ways to make money, and they're shifting to corn, they're shifting to wheat. Right? There's a lot of shifting taking place. And as they shift, they're like, hey, you know, this is more profitable for us. You can kind of see how something like wheat production, you only need your labor force for a certain amount of the year, you know. And so the slave labor force is not the most economical way because when they've done all the things they have to do, build roads, clean ground, break new, you know, they've already cut all the forests that you need to cut. You know, what else can they do? You have them there. You have, it's a cost. I'm looking at it from a cold calculating perspective of the plantation owner. I have to buy food, maintain the, you know, clothing, maintain the dwellings, etc. You know, on the other hand, if you had wheat, where you only need them for a certain amount of year, free laborers, they come and go. You know, when it's time to plant, when it's time to come harvest, after that, they're on their own, or whatever, that's their business. You know, I mean, I'm shortening it, but sometimes these guys, when you see them debating the Maryland legislature, they're like, Claire, you know, this is expensive.
When you say it's also the advancement of technology,
And that's
at the same time, you had the cotton gin.
Well, but you see, but
Later,
we're talking about Maryland, there's no cotton.
Okay,
There's no cotton in Maryland. And it's not that tobacco, the declining profits in tobacco, the profitability, especially that you could take your money and give more money somewhere else. Right? So what ends up happening to many of the Maryland slave owners who now have, again, a surplus labor force, they sell them. They sell them to the people who are doing cotton. Right? So we have a domestic and internal slave trade that goes on. Many times people confuse the transatlantic slave trade with the domestic American slave trade. And the domestic American slave trade, 1 million African Americans are sold from Maryland and Virginia into the so-called Deep South, into Alabama, into Louisiana, and that's part of it. So the Georgetown people now who are in this whole debate about their school, that's what happened in that case, because the Jesuits have all these, you know, it's like extra labor force. The school is going broke. What do? I sell them. And they sell the 200 and somewhere, 272. Yeah, 272. They sell them to Louisiana. And they're doing that. There's 1 million people who go through that, but it's between like 1800 and 1860. That's that number over that period of time. A lot of the etchings or drawings that we see, slave coffles and things like that. The movie 12 Years a Slave, you know, that's what it's evoking, is that period, is that they're talking about, that whole southern people from the upper south to the deep south. But underlying it, you know, is that economic reality. So we have to make those decisions.
I'd like to learn a little bit more about what's happening in West Africa, the goods that are being brought from either the Americas or from Europe to West Africa. Who is consuming, how are they using those goods, who's consuming them, and therefore providing or selling to the trade.
The ruling class. The ruling class in Sierra Leone, are those polities who are there. That's what they're consuming. They're consuming, well, first of all, again, guns and ammunition is like a big part of that export. But cloth that cloth can come from anywhere, meaning it could come from India because it's an international system now. A lot of it is coming from fancy stuff from Rouge, Antwerp, and those places, you know, with those nice markets they have, Venetian, you know, textiles, etc. That's what's there. And these guys are ostentatious, showing how rich people do. I'm not complaining about rich people. But you got money, you got extra, you have disposable income. You want your house to look good. You want to entertain. You want to sort of show off. One of the things that his visitors usually said about him, John Letson, is that he was a show-off guy. You know, he kind of like was always, he's got the latest fashion from wherever in the world. He had it there at one time, you know, and he spent lavishly in terms of entertainment. He was wicked, but he spent his money entertaining, you know, people who sort of came to him. That's James Carroll, the same James Carroll himself, he was afflicted with that, you know, he in his diary, in his little book, he's always boasting about his furniture and, you know, fanciest whatever, China, whatever, you know, he kind of had he was always going on about how much he had, those sorts of things like that. So, so there's a market, right, for luxury goods, right? there's a market for port, for rum that's coming from the Americas that gets shipped down, for cigars, and snuff and fancy snuff boxes and all, they're importing. There's a market because there's that class of people, this very ruthless, and it's a relatively new class along the West African coast there, who have emerged as part of that transatlantic slave trade. The same way, and I'm arguing the same way a new class is emerging here. When James Carroll leaves Ireland, he's a nobody, but he emerges here. It becomes a big deal. Barnum emerges in East Anglia, Essex rather. Right? He's a lowly guy, and he emerges. So all these groups of people, and they've got their counterparts all over Europe. They've got their counterparts throughout the Americas. They've got their counterparts in West Africa. These individuals are emerging, and they are cutting the bonds and ties to the older systems. In all of these places, older systems of mutuality, older systems of like a moral economy. You don't see somebody suffering, you don't care. You kind of have to take people in. You got to help people. Those are older ethical ideas, etc. That Europeans would have had previous to this moment, that West Africans would have had, and that people in the Americas would have had. Those older kind of societies. But we now have this commercial society. With these kind of values that come with a commercial society, which is like, hey, the market solves all problems. The market will do everything. You sink or you live or die. What's the rap artist, 50 Cent, his phrase, get rich or die trying. That's the ethos, for those people. That's basically what it is.
Was London a coffee house? Isn't that right?
So that's where they met.
Right.
Yes.
Before they actually had their own.
Yeah, so that's where they did business. You did business there. You went to the coffee house and you made your deals.
Which was being more product.
Yeah.
Great.
Exactly. Change your paper, you did your stuff. You traded gossip, and then it built those networks. Yes.
When you were talking about the slowdown of slavery in Maryland, you addressed the economic issues. In your opinion, a lot of historians pretty much agree, but to what extent do you think the influence of the Quaker and the early Methodist Church had in the downturn of the use of slaves in Maryland?
I think the Quakers are important because they're the first, they are the first, who make it unequivocally clear, they're against it, they prohibit it, and they do things about it. They expel people who, and it's funny because, but even the Quakers, there's a new book, Marcus Rediger has a new book about Benjamin Lay, who the Quakers, Benjamin Lay, L-A-Y is his name, who the Quakers expelled closer to this period. But later on, they adopted Lay's ideas, like decades ago, right there. But so even, here's the thing about how important, they're important. Making that argument, making those broader critiques, continuously bringing to the attention, of these individuals. You guys are making money and you're not thinking about humans, souls of people. But the thing is that the economic sort of like becomes a factor that is tipping, that tips over. So if somebody is hesitant, they hear the noise. There's a guy in Virginia, Carter, one of the Carter sons. The Carter family is the biggest slave-owning family in Virginia. One of the Carter sons. He inherits a plantation and he's a Baptist. He's seeing the light. And he frees all his slaves and his cousins and think he's a crazy man. How could you do this nonsense? But doing that, he feels good, and the people you free are happy too. But the system is intact. The system doesn't collapse. Folks say, there he is. So the change will happen, but not because the underlying moral arguments are there. But those are not the things that will change. The things that will change is profits. That's what the evidence tells us. The things that change are the profits. The moral suasions. The great Wilberforce in the British Parliament. Every year he would bring the bill. Every year he would bring the bill. Starting in 1790, he would bring the bill to abolish the transatlantic slave trade, and they would vote him down. Every year they're voting down. Boom. Late 1807, 1808, they're like, okay, we're ready for it. Now what had changed? Oh, there was Napoleon Bonaparte. There was that little matter of the Haitian Revolution. Those things have been happening. Now really developing industrial revolution in England itself, starting to change the economic dynamics of the country, and loosening the power of the planter class in British politics. Those are the kinds of things that were underlying.
Did slavery slow down equally around the world, or wasn't America one of the last to stop?
Yeah.
And
It was uneven.
yeah,
Like you're saying exactly, it was very uneven.
was America
Even within the United States, it was uneven. So when during the time of the American Revolution, some states went much further than others. So Pennsylvania is early off the gate, quicker influence, you're talking about Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, kind of early-ish, Vermont. All those places have slavery, but they moved. And yet, it's not just New England, the Yankees are against slavery, because New York still has slavery in the 1840s. Although it had officially abolished new births from becoming slave. New York had this sort of, when you get 18 years old, then you become free. So there were still enslaved people in New York up to the 1840s. A few, but they were still there. And it was perfectly legal. So New York is right in the heart of Yankee land. So, but people around New York are freeing, they're abolishing the institution of that. So I'm just saying how uneven it kind of was. And then you have this great big contribution in Maryland itself, where you have a larger free population than an enslaved population in Baltimore, which is like an ocean or an oasis or an island. Pick your airport. Surrounded by, the rural area, the plantation, and those sorts of things. Or Virginia itself, which is the largest slaveholding state for most of the country's history. Virginia. The slave population is the largest, the black population is the largest. And then it's also the state with the largest free black population. Virginia's free black population is large in the South Side, Richmond, South Side, Norfolk, Hampton Roads. That free population is there. Although there's just as large enslaved population. And so slavery is, we can get even more complicated. South Carolina, Charleston, Louisiana, New Orleans. And New Orleans has a large free black population from Spanish, French, that whole Creole, way back from that period. It looks much more like the Caribbean and Charleston. And it's unlike the rest of North America. And then of course we go to Canada, which again is part of North America, which again has a whole this dynamics. There's a whole bunch of people from Maryland and Virginia who go to Nova Scotia. We have thousands. Nova Scotia, Halifax and those places. After the American Revolution. They set themselves up there. I think the descendants are still there. There's lots of them there.
those are the
People
lawyers.
Loyalists, exactly. Who fought. So they were always free in Canada, that group. Right? And then the British abolished slavery in 1834, which made Canada a free soil, which is why for folks here, they don't take to Canada, you're good to go. So it's complicated that way. The picture isn't simply, people were slaves and they became free, or people in this area were slaves, well, in that area something else. It's always a variety. I know it's easier to flatten it out, it's black and white, right? But it's the real picture is always complicated.
Have you done any research on the private investors in the slave trade and the ships?
So one of the things that I'm going to do more on is find out who's investing. It'd be nice to have really like an inventory. That would take forever, but still it'd be very worthwhile. Who owns the things? It's something that because the census kind of can help us there too, but it's something that you can have a general picture of it. Generally speaking, and I don't think Maryland is any different, most of the people who are enslaved are owned by a small percentage of the population. Generally speaking. Right? It's not like, every white person owns a slave. No. I mean, they might have supported the system or kind of implicit, but not that they own slaves. Most of the white population does not own slaves. Most of the white population barely, they might own some land. And that's about it.
So if a slave was freed, what was his possibility? What could he do?
Freedom is a very dangerous thing.
Okay, but what?
It's shaky. So, when you're free, your freedom is always in danger. It's tenuous, that's the word. And you're always in danger of 12 years a slave. It actually did happen to him, but it happened to a lot of other people as well. Where you could go back into slavery, people could put you back into slavery. That could happen to you. Or you could lose things. And your freedom was always threatened. And so you were seen as you were an anomaly. And the planter class, specifically the planter class, directed a lot of resources, energy, pressure, containing you, squashing you. There was an attempt by some plantation owners to deport all free blacks out of the United States. Right? They spent decades trying to do that for a time. So it had different angles. They were going to the Maryland legislature, asking the Maryland legislature to appropriate funds, to finance the shipment of free blacks out of the North.
To where?
Liberia, in West Africa, near Sierra.
My research, I teach social studies for 8th grade, but I'm a historian with the Dorchester County Historical Society. And my research is on free black women in a comparative study of Talbot, Dorchester, and Carrollton counties. And it's so frustrating because in terms of free blacks, there's so little paper evidence, there's so little documentation, and it finally occurred to me that in order to stay free, you needed to remain below the radar and not bring yourself any attention that would get you in any way, shape, or form back to slavery.
It is very frustrating.
So, but I have a question for you in terms of, so my, Dr. Kate Larson and Dr. Claire Small are my thesis advisors, and they want me to do, I've done this comparative analysis of these free black women prior to the Civil War. Now they want me to compare it to a city that would have had a large free black population, which is Baltimore. So I've got about 5,000 pages of the 1860 federal census for Baltimore City. And of course, the rules for interpreting census documents for those enumerators only came out in 1850, but they're not all consistent in following the rules. So Maryland, or Baltimore, has what I always assumed was a very wealthy free black population, but from what I'm going through in the census documents, it's not speaking to that at all.
No.
So what would be other documents or other sources that I would look at to really get a good idea of what the per capita worth of a free black person was in Baltimore right before the Civil War? Probate wills.
Yeah.
Okay. Because of the estate inventories and stuff like that. So I'm spending a lot of time in a courthouse, is what you're telling me.
And the Maryland State Archives, the Hall of Records.
Okay, yeah. Okay, great. Oh, wonderful.
So, he found it now.
Mine's quite quick. You talked about the people from Sierra Leone being specialists in rice cultivation, but also in metalsmithing. With your research, have you found that some of those that came over and were enslaved went into specifically metalsmithing and then were rented out? Because I know that there was some of that interslave trading in the Americas where it wasn't permanent, it's all rent you, toby for a year kind of thing, or to do a project.
Yeah, that's what that happened. Whether these particular people were the ones that happened to, I don't know. Because we'll need to be able to follow them. And since we don't have their names, it's a cowardly thing to ask them. So one route would be finding out who bought them, and then seeing if that could take us somewhere else.
Were there contracts though about that rental period, rental labor, specialized labor, or was it more just sort of gentleman's agreement?
Oh, no, both. You kind of have both, because actually Carol, now that you mentioned it, Carol talks about who owns him, meaning like he's rented. And what Carol is also doing is he also rents out his indentured servants. He has Irish indentured servants as well. He's kind of clear about that part. So we know that that's happening. He's made an agreement, with the person who's renting them out. Some of it is unspoken. In his last will and testament, there's all that who owes me and what to do with the money that you owe and what to do with that she owes. And explaining what they owe for.
Gotcha.
So we have documents.
So do we know much about the interaction between, say, slaves and the native community, like the Piscataway
in Maryland.
And I know that, you know, there's a lot there. There's a lot there. It's the questions that historians ask in the documents, you know? Because I'm reading Carroll, all I'm reading is this dry day book. This is account book. But you have, is the questions you bring to the account book. So the thing that struck me, reading Carroll, and people have written, somebody wrote a dissertation on Carroll's book about his penchant for fancy clothing and whatever. But I'm not interested in that part of Carroll. You know, and I'm reading 300 pages, and this person has almost nothing to say. I mean, because you can ask any question about this issue of slavery. But I'm reading Carroll's comments, his notations about the people he's selling. There's one woman on that ship, and he says about her, because he has his columns, and at the end, the far right, he says, sprightly. Sprightly. So it's a couple of years now, and I'm still trying to absorb and figure out what the context of that was in the story. And I'm saying, like, here she is speaking to us, you know, in this dry ledger. You know when you see weeds growing up through the concrete? You know, it's like, you know, I'm here, you know. You're trying to, I'm still here. But I've been trying to figure that whole, she's got nothing to say about the other people. I mean, he's actually telling us something about the personality of this woman, you know. Otherwise, everybody is silent, right? They're just, you know, Negro woman, Negro man, Negro boy. You know, it's sprightly. I'm like, what did she do to him? I'm just thinking, what? A commotion. You know, like something had to happen for it to remain in his mind, for him to think that he's going to write that down. He's a businessman. Why don't he bother what was,
Who was she?
She was a slave woman.
What was her name?
Oh, there's no name. She's Negro woman.
Yeah.
Negro woman. It's an animal Negro woman. But Carol, she left her mark on Carol. She left her mark on him because he's told us over 300 years it's sprightly. And I'm just talking about this whole business of, you know, where the records. You know, you kind of have to read between the lines. You have to read against the grain. You know, it's all of those sorts of things to get this stuff out there. When people pass a law saying we're going to ban, when you look at the Virginia Slave Code, it's the first Virginia Slave Code from 1700. They passed a law banning interracial unions, right? And they list the punishment for the white women specifically, who, you know, if they sleep with a black man, also black men. The amount of questions that are raised in my mind about what is going on, you know, in a law, right? And to me, it really turns over a lot of our notions about what the little people, the folks who didn't have a voice, what they're doing. You know, why would the Virginia legislature think it important first to write that law, and second to have the punishment? They take a child from her, to make that child, you know, a servant for X amount of time, and so she loses all these privileges. You know, there's a lot going on there.
Racial purity.
Yeah, you know, those markers are created, but we're talking about we're talking about creating markers. This is that the divisions are not natural divisions.
So speaking of that and creating markers, so what struck me at the beginning of the lecture was how small the percentages of the transatlantic slave trade that came to the North America.
Yeah.
So because of that, was there a large difference in impact between the way that there were racial constructs in South America versus North America?
Mm-hmm.
So because there were so few here versus down there, so did that change sort of the way that either country, or do you know how they sort of, their racial construct, like a huge divide between those populations there?
Yes, there's a good point there, and historians talk and write and think about that all the time. The United States is the only country in the world, seriously, the only country in the world that has the one-drop rule. What we call the one-drop rule. One-drop rule. So we're the only country in the world that has that. You go, and even in the Americas, you go past the Rio Grande and it changes immediately. You know, Mexico, Cuba, all the way down to Argentina. It changes. One drop doesn't make you one or the other. You know, it makes you all kinds of things. Now, there's racial hierarchy, yes, there is. You know, and a notion of whites on top, yes, there is, all that stuff, but it operates a different way. So that race operates differently in Latin America and the Caribbean than it does in North America. Which again, the point about race being this very kind of,
Artificial.
yes, it is. Yeah, this is, and so we're looking at how it is constructed, how it was constructed in this context, those are the things. And that's, that proportion of population, that's a big part of it. And who plays the intermediate class and that sort of thing. What the American plantation owners do, the plantation class does here, is that it identifies poor whites, dispossessed whites, and says, look, I'll give you a few crumbs, use a figure of speech here. And in turn, you kind of have to protect the system. In Brazil, and in Cuba, and Mexico, and other places, that class is not available. That group of people are not available. And so others perform that role. And that does usually mix people, mestizo, and different meanings that people are given mixed, Indian white, Indian black, black white.
You're sort of getting into the question that I've had for a little while here, and that was your attitudes on the formation of really what I would almost call white supremacy, white racism in America versus other parts of the world. The one thing that I did hear some other pretty authoritative person speaking was that somewhere in the maybe early 1600s, they actually passed legislation to separate the indentured servants who tended to be white, who were actually co-living with frequently black people, and they separated white from black, and indeed it's your one drop, it's your 2/3 of a person, of a white person. This was all legislation passed by the British parliamentarian system, presumably.
No, and it's the same thing I was talking about with the no ban on sex, the interracial unions, marriage. So it's a whole bunch of those things. But those things are taking place at the end of the 17th century. All those laws that are separating people by law.
Yeah.
And it's the local people who do it, not the British system.
It was the local people.
Yeah, it's a Virginia Assembly that's doing it, and the Maryland Assembly is following up with that, and so they're the model, they're the prototype, and everybody else goes around with it. Virginia, I'm talking about. No, but it's definitely the locals who do that, not London. London is like, bring the money.
What's your sense of why the stratification became so prescribed, so defined, say, in Louisiana with mulatto and octoroon and quadroon? What was it about Louisiana that made that stratification so defined?
So Louisiana is a lot more like the rest of the Americas. And Louisiana only comes into English North America after the purchase, in the 19th century. So remember this, that system had been existing for 300 years up until that point. I mean, if we kind of think about it again from another angle, that system existed longer than it has not existed. Right? If we're going to 1500, 300 years is 1800. We haven't reached 300 years since. So it took a long time to work itself out, to develop these structures, these racial hierarchies that we're talking about, these relationships. So South Carolina, the Low Country, so that's most of that area, Charleston, that area, and Louisiana, again, New Orleans and general, the Delta there, because actually parts of Mississippi have that, lots of them have that tradition, are part of that other system. And cotton only comes into the South after the 1800s, after the Louisiana Purchase, is that cotton expansion. Most of the country's history with slavery and plantation is before cotton. Cotton's like the last 60 years. Only the last 60 years. Although cotton is the thing that's on everybody's head, slavery, and the movies even have plantation that we use for taro in Congo de Bello, which is Bossage is in Louisiana. It's only one going down between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and it's got the oak alley, you know, the trees and this grand.
I've seen, it's a famous picture.
Yeah, very famous, iconic sort of thing, you know. And that writ large, that slavery, you know, in the United States, no, that's not accurate. It's not the typical accurate over the entirety of the history of the world.
For the sake of time, I'm gonna cut you guys off. I'm so sorry because I am really, really enjoying the conversation, but I'm really cognizant of it being lunchtime. Or at least my tummy's rumbling. So I want to give everybody some time to get their lunch, and if you all are interested in coming back, just hang on to your stickers. I'd love to have everybody join us again for our conversation from, starting at 1 o'clock. Please join me in giving another round of applause.